Raised by Demons, a true and accurate autobiography. Well, sorta. Part 7. At Memorial Hospital, the doctors removed the plastic fibers embedded in Henry's whitish, waxy, seared flesh. He was kept under sedation on his stomach as his third-degree burns were concentrated on the backs of his legs and buttocks, thanks to his non-stop running. During consultation with his mother, the doctor explained her son's kidneys were not functioning, the result of which would be toxic poisoning. Without his kidneys, he might live a week or two, but no more. Henry's father, meanwhile, was still in California on a recruiting trip for investors. He dared not disappoint such important movie clients, as who knew if there'd be a second chance. This left Henry's mother to cope alone, which would be her lot in life with all family struggles. Fortunately, a widowed neighbor at the last moment agreed to take their daughter to make sure she went to school and was fed and so forth. Henry's mother had not lived in the area long enough to get to know the woman other than say hello on her way someplace else. The neighborhood scuttlebutt was that the older woman was nice, kept to herself, and might have a tendency towards overly religious, as she didn't participate in Halloween and had religious decorations in her front yard during Christmas. Otherwise, she was quite harmless. However, there had been no other choice in the matter, as she'd been the only one to offer help. "I've seen worse pull through," the doctor offered the grieving mother once they got her son in a room in the hospital. "I'm not a miracle worker, but at his age, these kids can outgrow a lizard for new skin, so there'll be no need for grafting. He'll keep the scars below the belt line to his ankles until middle age, but luckily he's not a girl, and the burn scars won't show except in a bathing suit. His kidneys are the main problem. We have to keep pumping liquids in intravenously to stave off dehydration, but he's not passing anything out."
"Is he in pain?" Henry's mother asked.
"Not at the present, as the fire burned away the pain nerves. But soon enough. I worry more about you at present, as you look so distraught. You must get rest, as this could be a long ordeal. But the situation is by no means hopeless."
"When will he be in pain?" she pressed.
"Later." He patted her hand. "But we have drugs for that." The elderly woman next door arrived with Henry's sister.
"Is he going to die?" Henry's sister asked her mother upon entering the room. "No, he's better, I think," she said, hugging her daughter, while at the same time grasping the hand of her neighbor. "Thanks for helping out. If you hadn't been around, I don't know what I would have done." "I'm just glad to be of use," the older woman said. "Your daughter can stay with me as long as she likes. I'll give her breakfast, take her to school, and pick her up. She can have the spare bedroom however long it's needed."
"Oh, you're such a blessing. What would I do without you? Things can't go on much longer. If only you'll use the rest." She choked up and fell against the older woman in tears as her daughter hugged both women around their legs.
Now, there. The neighbor woman patted her shoulder. "I'll say a prayer. Don't you worry. God will get you through this."
"Oh, I wish I believed that."
"No?"
"I was raised a Christian Scientist, and then my sister got a goiter. It took a year of choking before she died because she refused to see a doctor."
"I see. And afterwards you lost hope," the widow woman guessed.
"I'm afraid so. She was my favorite of 3 other sisters."
"I'm sorry to hear that, but I'll pray every day that your son's health be restored and your faith."
"That's nice. But I must get back to my son."
"After your child recovers," the widow woman said while leaving the hospital room, "you tell him I prayed for him."
"I will." After hugging and kissing her daughter, she closed the door. Henry did not pass any liquids the rest of that evening into the night, as his mother sat next to his bed, keeping an eye on the pan below the catheter hose. She never left his side the following days also. After the usual long, endless nights, she couldn't keep from nodding off. having not slept except in fits since the fire. A sound perked her up. In the unlit room, this noise couldn't be seen. There it was again. Fearing to breathe in case she covered up the sound and straining to hear above the dings, peeps, and drips that filled the room off all the machinery, plus the quiet sighs of her sleeping son, she held her breath. Ping! She bent forward, grasping the rail of the hospital bed, and cocked her head to the side, fearful she might have imagined the sound. Ping! Ping! Leaping to her feet, she bent over her still sleeping son, hands cupped behind her ears like radar dishes searching for an unidentified object. Ping! Ping! Ping, 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 ping. Pee! The woman shrieked. Real honest to goodness pee! She fled into the hallway. Pee! He peed! He's peeing! She grabbed hold of the nearest person she could find, whether medically dressed or not. Come see! Everyone! Come quick! See! Hurry! Before he stops! My son peed! He's peeing! Croker's return to the dark domain would have been bad enough, but once having gotten used to light, non-sulfuric air and less than smothering heat, the experience was immeasurably worse. The twilight disoriented him, and a rotten egg stench upon entering the grand stone chamber turned his stomach. There was a procedure for approaching the throne, and it better be observed, too. Any who deviated from correct protocol risked a drubbing by the dreaded mallet and being dragged off by serpents to a fiery swamp. Croker prostrated himself on the scalding rock floor, scooting forward on his stomach down the aisle in a crawl known as the lizard slither. Face down and arms outstretched, he pulled himself forward using his knees and feet to scoot while resisting the urge to lift his forehead, nose, and chin off the burning hot tiles. Just when he felt he must look around to see how far he'd gone and get oriented, a noise stopped him. Rise! An authoritative voice boomed as loud as boulders colliding. Croker assumed a kneeling position with head bowed and hands clasped under his chin, his knees now bearing the brunt of the hot plate floor. Stand! Wincing at the thunderous noise, Croker impulsively cocked his head to the side to protect that ear. But thinking better, he straightened, unsure if he'd breached protocol. He dared not lift his head. Speak, dregs, Sublord Chance Medley demanded, using the derogatory nickname for dragoon, no doubt as an intentional humiliation. We failed, merciless one, Croker murmured, while finally daring to lift his head. What he saw shocked him. He had stopped in the nick of time to avoid encountering the giant who catches trespassers to make into meat pies. Please understand, pitiless one, Croker cried over the yelling of those already caught. How could we know the boy's mother would barge in at the last second and put out the fire? Who reacts that quickly? It was bad luck. For you, the sublord's voice boomed over the pleas for mercy. You must learn how failures are received in this realm. You need time, lots and lots of time, to contemplate how to improve and do better. If you remember, harshest of masters, it was my wish to have been assigned a different assistant. I would have had better results without such a useless, bungling partner. If that was not disadvantageous enough, I also have to battle the dreaded one. May his name be forever debarred from this domain. He thwarts my every move, always at the last moment. Excuses, 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 you worthless dregs, the sublord shouted. Stop trying to shift the blame. Wheedling won't save you. Your partner was not in charge, you were. And you'll suffer the consequences. Off with you. But cease, the sublord Chance Medley demanded. Not one word more. Away! Ah! Croker's screams faded as the pace of his fall increased. Henry had aged during the previous encounter to entering high school. The turbulence of his life had worsened. For one thing, he hated school, as sitting still for hours on end was all but impossible. But for another, he was a social outcast, so that his friends tended to be boys with behavioral problems. His parents then, in an attempt to get him away from bad influences, of which he was the main one, and how were they to get him away from himself? Now, that's one for the behavioral gurus. Anyway, his parents sent him to a military academy to not only educate him, but teach him discipline. Only how does the undisciplined become disciplined? With threats? With bribery? With punishment? How? More on that later. Despite his dislike of school, Henry almost made it to the end of the first year at military academy, falling short by only a few months. He and two buddies, one of whom was the previously mentioned older boy neighbor that lived across the street and that taught him the essentials of manhood, smoking, cussing, beer drinking, playing poker, and so on. Anyway, the three stole away one night from the dorm to a shallow creek that fed into the Guadalupe River in order to share a fifth of Old Crow whiskey. Huddled under a railroad bridge, Henry, unlike his two companions, was unused to hard liquor and passed out cold as a gravestone. To get him back to the dorm, his pals tied a rope around their unconscious friend and drug him up the creek embankment, across a lawn, up a flight of stairs, and put him to bed. Come morning, the only thing worse than his hangover were the rope burns that rubbed off one side of his pectoral muscle. He staggered across campus in blood-drenched pajamas to the school infirmary. Even at that, he might not have been kicked out of school, except the bottle of Old Crow was stolen by Henry. The disgrace of being unable to finish the semester was worsened because of not being given the basketball letter he'd earned. The latter punishment amounted to medieval torture, in Henry's opinion, so that once back home in public school, he brooded over the time he spent practicing, playing hard to win games, and most of all, the camaraderie lost with his teammates. As a result, he resolved to improve his life by sheer grit and willpower. To start his new improved lifestyle, he penned the following letter to the president of the military school. Office of the President, Shriner Military Institute, Kerrville, Texas. Dear Mr. President, I sincerely apologize for my recent misbehavior resulting in my being justly expelled. I ask your forgiveness for my inexcusable actions. I wish to add the punishment meted out to me was what I deserved and was probably too lenient. You and your board of directors had every right to expel me, and I'm glad you did on account of I have been forced to reevaluate my life and decide I will never again be a disciplinary problem. No, it's time to grow up and accept responsibility for my actions. Thus, I have made up my mind to become an exemplary pupil and a worthy leader of young men. Should you grant my reinstatement next fall, which I am requesting but would not blame you for denying, you will witness a transformation that will be the talk of the school. Just think of the example to other students of how through willpower and determination alone one of your students changed from a bad kid to an exemplary one. You have my word. I will be an advocate among my fellow students to behave honorably, righteously, and with integrity. Here's hoping you and the board of directors will have a change of heart towards me and allow a repentant young man to prove his worth and intent to remake his character. Whatever your decision, I cannot describe the depth of my gratitude for your kind consideration and await your decision. Most sincerely yours, Henry. The letter so impressed the board of directors that the president responded personally and then published the entirety on the front page of the first edition of the school paper. Not only had Henry's application to be reinstated been accepted, but come the next fall, he almost made it to the end of that semester before being kicked out again. His expulsion was somewhat of a remarkable event in that he was the only student in the school's history to be booted out twice. As he packed his belongings, Henry's pals laughingly accused him of having pulled one over on the president and the board of directors. But actually, that was not the case. He really wanted to be like the person he described in the letter to the president, but no matter how hard he tried or how well he started out, he just could not keep up the pace to be the good character he idealized. As an alternative to yet another failure then, he and another boy decided to run away to California to live as beach bums. The escapade had gone sour from the start. For one thing, the bus ride did not go as planned in that instead of straight through to Midland, there was a layover in Fredericksburg that took up most of the night. If either had bothered to consult the bus schedule, they would have known. Instead, they ended up stranded in a hotel lobby that doubled as a depot until the wee hours of the morning. With nothing better to do, they crawled into the closed cafe connected to the hotel and drank Lone Star beers out of a cooler. By the time the bus arrived, the driver had to help them aboard, plus their suitcases, which they'd emptied of clothes and filled with beer. Before long, empty bottles rolled up and down the aisles, clanking into one another. Around midday, they arrived in Midland and were welcomed by a gathering of their parents, neighbors, and deputies from the sheriff's department who put the two in handcuffs. So much for the beach bum dream. Finally, they would get the chance to meet the West Texas celebrity known as Big Ed Darnell, the sheriff of Midland County. Revered for his gruffness and no-nonsense approach to criminal justice, it was reported far and wide many a lawbreaker had changed addresses to more tolerant, sympathetic jurisdictions. The two boys sat on opposite sides of the patrol car back seat, each tucked in the corners, the only sound being staticky radio traffic. Neither of the officers in front spoke, much less informed the two in back where they were being taken, but that would have been a waste of words anyway. Both knew they would end up in the sheriff's basement offices in the Midland County Courthouse. While waiting on a cushionless bench without armrest as uncomfortable as a 2x8 plank on sawhorses, both boys stared in silence at the sheriff's shut door. At last, a deputy appeared, summoning them inside. Sheriff Darnell wasn't called Big Ed for nothing. He so overfilled the swivel chair he occupied he made it look like a stool. The young, unsmiling deputy who'd motioned them inside stood beside the door. Big Ed didn't speak at first. He studied his arrestees individually with unblinking eyes under thick, bushy brows. Both boys squirmed. Sheriff Big Ed tisk at last, as if finding nothing redeemable in either one. Either of you Al Capone beer robbers knowed what I keep stored on the top floor of this here courthouse? He asked in a slow, bass, gravelly voice. No, sir, the two said in unison, even though the whole town knew the answer to that question. The courthouse top floor was the county jail. Up top of this here courthouse, on the 4th floor, the sheriff grumbled, is locked in big communal cages, the meanest, the orneriest old boys you ever don't want to meet. Some kill for fun, others make gal friends out of weaklings, others turn them fraidy cats to fight back into boy slaves. Man, oh man, he half laughed, would them vile preverts like to get their dirty-nailed hands on a couple of young good-lookers like the pair of you. Henry grabbed his shirt collar and gulped, and his friend wiped at his eyes.
Either of you two ever heard the hollering that goes out of the top floor while walking downtown going to, oh, say, a movie theater maybe or something?
They nodded.
Knowed why?
The two rolled their heads back and forth.
Most think it's on account of their rough, tough lowlifers who hate free folks and shout insults to razz them, but 'tain't so. It's them weak ones yelling for someone to help 'em. Now, as far as you two go, know what I've a mind to do?
No, sir, they answered, after staring wide-eyed at one another.
Give you to 'em, he said, and for the first time smiling. Reckon I'd larn you better than to help yourself to some poor cafe owner's stock a bigger.
Yes, sir. No, sir.
They contradicted each other and gawked as the right answer was elusive.
Okay, the sheriff lifted his boots off the desk and dropped his feet to the floor. If then you two got your mind set on joining them boys upstairs, let's go.
Both boys' faces turned cadaver gray.
No?
Sheriff Big Ed sat back, recrossing his boots on his desk, his chair tilted to its limits seemingly.
Best I not see neither of you two in my office again, here. If and I do, that's exactly where I'll put you. Here go, boys, is what I'll say.
Whether any of that was true, or whether Sheriff Big Ed Darnell was trying to scare the bejesus out of them, who knows? But Henry never forgot that warning. And so began a series of sessions with therapists, counselors, psychologists, and psychiatrists for Henry. His first began with an elderly woman counselor after high school classes ended. They met at her home overlooking a circular driveway. Henry learned about the woman's grandmother who raised her and would tie her to a post in a corral and beat her with a horsewhip. After suffering several nervous breakdowns, the therapist underwent shock treatments in a mental institution where she learned to be a counselor. Henry, in turn, confessed his dream to get away and live the stress-free life on the seashore like Frankie Avalon and Annette Funicello in Beach Blanket Bingo. His parents thought such ideas the immature nonsense of a frivolous fool, but they were Great Depression babies, and hard work was their idol. Surprisingly, the therapist did not disagree with Henry. She said his parents might be surprised at the number of so-called frivolous fools who believe that exact same notion or one like it and end up in an inescapable life of poverty and squalor. The idea was the basis for the drug culture. However, there was another way. The therapist suggested a remedy that was far less expensive and did not require any life alterations. Her method promised to not only relieve the anxiety that so plagued him, but free him from his past, release all his sadness, and teach him to handle adversity with calm resolve. The answer to his problems and the pathway to emotional health was quite simple. He needed to cry. Afterwards, he would find peace, joy, and wholeness. Henry believed the woman too. He tried. Really tried hard, but for the life of him, he could not conjure up one tear. Every session he would squint, grimace, and whimper, but his eyes remained as moistureless as an Arabian wadi. Frustrated and feeling a failure, after every session he wished for something to say to comfort the counselor, who more often than not was left sobbing at her desk. Snuffer, meanwhile, had been waiting until it looked like his compatriot would never return. Before leaving for his report to Sublord Chance Medley, Croker made him swear not to interfere with their target. But then again, no telling what might have happened to Croker. He could have been sent to some other venue, or else the sublord might have thrown one of his tantrums and cast him in a punishment chamber for who knows how long. Besides, if Snuffer did find a way to accomplish their mission, wouldn't Croker be pleased on his return? And what harm could it do to watch Henry in case some unexpected opportunity arose at the right time and right place? Wouldn't that get both he and Croker back in the sublord's good graces? Why, he might even be declared a hero and be congratulated by a bright one whose specialty was impersonating angels. Oh, how marvelous! How grand! The opportunity Snuffer had been waiting for arrived one day after Henry's father, who'd been drinking all night after hearing yesterday his Hollywood movie creme de la cremes welched on their promises to back his oil deals, leaving him bankrupt and unhireable as oil companies blackballed any who they suspected of disloyalty. As a result, the father and son had such a rancorous exchange that the humiliated 10th grader fled the house, snatching at car keys on the way out the door. Not until he was outside did he realize he'd mistakenly grabbed the keys to his father's brand new purchased Austin Healey Sprite. Instead of the 1950 Chevy station wagon he was allowed to drive with an adult. That was the stipulation on his learner's permit driver's license. Too late to go back and exchange them now, he leaped into the two-seater convertible that was called Bug-Eye for its frog-faced front end, backed down the driveway and hit the accelerator. Although never having actually driven the car, his father allowed him to sit in it while parked and work the clutch while shifting the 5-gear pattern. The sports car handled easily enough, although there was no little grinding in between gears, cornered at a touch so that several curbs were run over, and the accelerator was so peppy he sideswiped one or two parked cars. Of course, a high-speed chase ensued, with Henry's father trying to keep up in the Chevy wagon. Not only was the station wagon too bulky and cornered like a tanker, but the driver had to have known if he got pulled over for speeding or otherwise, he'd face not only a DWI, but possibly jail time. Nevertheless, the two cars raced briefly in and out of neighborhoods, up the 4-lane Wall Street, out Andrews Highway, and finally on to Wadley Avenue, where the chase ended. No doubt Henry's father sobered up enough to realize the speeders were bound to attract the attention of law enforcement, and besides, where was his son to go? He would have to return home sooner or later. What his father couldn't have known, and neither did Henry for that matter, was an unseen rider accompanied his son who had been waiting for just such an opportunity. To be continued.
For a continuation of Raised by Demons, plus books, plus free short stories, plus videos, go to thereisageneration.com. All one word, thereisageneration.com.